All right, let's go ahead and get started. Being kind of a one class, one off, it's sometimes hard for me to kind of be concise, and that's what I'm going to attempt to do. I won't leave you on a cliffhanger. But what I would like to discuss is the transition in the kingdom of Judah from Solomon and into the reign of Rehoboam, and then eventually Jeroboam in the north. But let's back up just a little bit. For much of the reign of Solomon, things went pretty well. It was in the latter half of his reign that things began to take a turn for the worse. If you go to 1 Kings chapter 11, and I want you to notice there beginning at verse 9, this again is the English Standard Translation. This statement is made about Solomon and where he is in his relationship with God. So it says in verse 9, "And the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, from the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice and had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods, but he did not keep what the Lord commanded. Therefore the Lord said to Solomon, since this has been your practice, and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes that I have commanded you, I will tear the kingdom from you and will give it to your servant. Yet for the sake of David, your father, I will not do it in your days, but I will tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I will not tear away all the kingdom, but I will give one tribe to your son for the sake of David, and my servant for the sake of Jerusalem that I have chosen." So, of course, the kingdom of Israel has been through some things. Went through all the period with Saul, and how Saul had turned away from God pretty quickly, actually, and had done things that were wicked. Now, the one thing Saul did not do that you do see in Solomon and later kings is this idolatry that he gets into. The idol worship becomes very rampant, especially as you move forward into Rehoboam and Jeroboam and those kings who would come afterwards. So before this point, and I know this map's small, but if you can kind of notice the green area and then the purple, this was the nation of Israel as it was constituted. And you may remember that in the south, Judah had settled along the Salt Sea. And that's where you'll find Jerusalem right here. And then you have two of the 12 settle in this area. And then you have the majority of the tribes settling to the north. And those are the ones, when we're discussing those who break away from the house of David, these are the groups we're talking about, are these groups. Now, at this point, God calls Judah one tribe because Benjamin had pretty much been desolate for various reasons. And so they had really been overwhelmed into the tribe of Judah at this point. So God says that he's going to tear away 10 of the 12 and give them to someone else. Something else I want to note there. In the main kind of seeming driver of this is that not only had Solomon went into wickedness, not only had he sinned against God, but he had actually went into idolatry. Now, where did that come from? Yeah, you remember Solomon had really gotten into marrying these women of foreign kings. And he had his heart turned because of that and had followed after them. That was a problem David never had. Now, David did some things that were wicked. We know that. But he never went into idolatry. And that seems to have been the line with God, that he could not abide beyond that point. So once a king went into idolatry, that was kind of the end of it. So God promises that his son will reign, but only over the area in purple, the kingdom of Judah. All right, so now if you will fast forward in time, let's see, one other thing I wanted to note. All right, so the first time we are introduced, that I'm aware of, to Jeroboam is in verse 26 of this same chapter. The name Jeroboam comes up. Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, an Ephraimite. So where did he come from? Ephraim. What do we know about Ephraim? Who are the Ephraimites? Joseph's son, right? Yes. Yeah. So they're in the north. If I can find Ephraim for you. So here's the hill country of Ephraim here. Okay, so Ephraim here. Now that's important in a minute when he sets up his two worship sites in Bethel and in Dan in the north, right? So, but he's from the hill country here in Ephraim. Also, this is where, if you go to John chapter 4, and Jesus meets the Samaritan woman, and she's talking about the mountain. What mountain is she talking about? Does anybody remember? Where? No, Mount Gerizim. That was a place of worship for the northern kingdoms. And so you'll notice it's right here in the hill country of Ephraim. So just kind of something interesting to put in mind here. But he's definitely not of the lineage of David. And so you'll see Jeroboam gets raised to this station. If you'll continue on here, let's see. Verse 28, it says about Jeroboam, he was very able, and when Solomon saw that the young man was industrious, he gave him charge over all the forced labor of the house of Joseph. At that time, when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, the prophet Haggai, this Silonite, found him on the road. And Haggai had dressed himself in a new garment, and the two of them were alone in the open country. And Haggai laid hold of the new garment that was on him and tore it into 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, "Take for yourself 10 pieces. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I'm about to tear the kingdom from the hand of Solomon and give you 10 tribes. But he shall have 1 tribe for the sake of my servant David, for the sake of Jerusalem, the city that I have chosen out of all Israel. Because they have forsaken me and worship the Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and then Chemosh, the god of Moab, and Milcom, the god of the Ammonites." So God sends the prophet, and he tears the garment, tears off 12 pieces. He allows Jeroboam to have 10 of those, representing the 10 northern tribes he'll take possession of. So actually he has, as you can tell, slightly larger landmass than does Rehoboam later on. Okay, so that gets us to chapter 12. That's where I want to fast forward to. Chapter 12 and verse 1. All right. Since I'm going to be doing a lot of talking, I need somebody to help me read, or I'm going to lose my voice. So somebody read verses 1 through 5, please. This is 1 Kings 12, 1 through 5. Who's a good, strong reader who'd like to take that on? Harry, will you read it?
I have the English Standard Version, and I'm reading it this year. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. And as soon as Jeroboam the son of Nebat heard of it, for he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon, then Jeroboam returned from Egypt, and they sent and called him. And Jeroboam and all the assembly of Israel came and said to Rehoboam, your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke on us, and we will serve you. He said to them, go away for 3 days, then come again to me. So the people went away.
Okay, so a couple interesting notes here. So you have Rehoboam. He comes to Shechem. Again, here's Shechem. It's right here in the north. So he's coming up to the north. He's a new king. So what do you want to do? You're going to try to consolidate power. Even though God had already told him what's going to happen, he's still going to do what kings do. So he comes to the north to hopefully consolidate those tribes around him. And so when he does that, Jeroboam, who had run because of what God had said, because Solomon was going to try to kill him, he hears what's coming, and I guess he feels safe enough to come back. So he joins back with the crowd. Before we get into what's actually said here, Jeroboam had been placed pretty high up by Solomon prior to the downfall. It's almost a similar situation to Saul and David, where David had risen until Saul found out that he was God's chosen man, and then David had to flee. Well, here Jeroboam has to flee as well. So we come back together, and they make a request. So the northern tribes make a request. What's the request? So if you go back, let me see. So if you go back to chapter 4. Okay, so chapter 4, there's a couple of verses there that talk about this idea of the task Solomon had put on them. He had ordered them to provide for the kingdom in verse 7. Verse 22, let me pull this up. Solomon's provision for one day was 30 cores of flour. And he goes through all this list of these things he's requiring of them. And then if you go to, I don't know if there's a particular verse that just spells that out directly. I'm just trying to look here.
But didn't he use
I see.
what they gave him for his, his people, his servants? I mean, the people that lived with him, because he had such a big...
Yeah, I'm sure that's what he did, but they felt like this was a very heavy burden put on the northern kingdoms. So it's just like any group in a nation who feels unfairly overly taxed. And they felt overly taxed by the king. And so whatever the exact nature of this yoke is, they feel it's just too much. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so hold on to that one just for a minute. We'll come back to that. I want to work my way there, but you're right. Yeah, he's going to, he gives a pretty powerful description later on about whips. Yes, ma'am.
About all the time it took. I mean, the temple was decently big, but then he built this house that was just massive. And it talked about how all the trees that they were, taken from Lebanon, and then the great stones, and these weren't like, just like the size of a pickup truck. I mean, it's not like these stones were like, many, many tens of thousands of pounds to have to move. I mean, and he enforced all the slave labor of the Canaanites. But, he was like massively, like expecting a lot of work, and then on top of that, the taxes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's a good point about the temple. They'd been heavily taxed during the building of that and his own home. So they're looking for a break. And so let me ask this. Does their request seem unreasonable? No. And as you read the first 5, there's nothing really jumps out that's bad, right? He even says, go away, come back in 3 days, and I'll give you my decision, basically. So everything's going well so far. Then let's go to verse 6. Verse 6, then King Rehoboam took counsel with the old men who stood before Solomon, his father, while he was yet alive, saying, how do you advise me to answer these people? And they said to him, if your servant will, if you will be a servant to this people today and serve them and speak good works to them, when you answer them, they will be your servants forever. Now again, you read that, and if you just stop there, does that sound like good advice? It's interesting that he kind of turns this on Solomon, or they do, and they say to him what? You need to be a servant to them. Instead of asking them to serve more, why don't you look how you can serve them? I think that's great advice, and would have, I think, done wonders for Rehoboam had he taken that advice. So I think the advice is good. Did he go to the right people to ask for advice? He does. He goes to the older men who've been through the wars of politics, who understand, I think, how to deal with these kind of situations. I think he went to the right people and heard the right things. But we can hear advice, good advice, and it doesn't mean we're going to follow it. So it's not enough just to have the right advisor or the right advice, but to hear it. Absolutely. So if you will read, let's go back there to verse 8. Somebody read verses 8 through 11.
Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked him, what is your advice? How should we answer these people who say to me, lighten the load and yoke your father put on? The young men who had grown up with him replied, tell these people who have said to you, your father put a heavy yoke on us to make our yoke lighter. Tell them, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions.
So, interesting turn of affairs. He decides, I'm not going to listen to these old guys. And doesn't exactly tell us why. We just know he did. He abandons their counsel and goes where? To the young, it describes him as a young man he had grown up with. Why go to them? There's friends. Yes, ma'am. I think there's some definite truth in that. What they say probably is more appealing.
His picture of who he is in their eyes and all that sort of, why you look at what results.
Is there any clue here that gives us any indication to his level of pride and arrogance? What are some of those clues you notice here? Yeah, so he says he's interesting turn of phrase. You know, culturally, we live in different cultures, so this may have been a saying of that day. I don't know. It's not one I'm familiar with, but he says in verse 10. Verse 11. He says, verse 10. I was right. My little finger is thicker than my father's thighs. What? Well, what is he? No, that. Well, yeah, his friends told him to say that, and he'll turn around and say it. What is the ideal there? You think? Pride, but what does he mean? My finger is thicker than my father's waist, or my father's thigh. So much bigger, powerful. Yeah. You thought my father was strong. Just get a load of me. Yeah. And maybe so, yeah. Do you have something, Lisa?
So I wanted to say two things that, David was not a great father. Like, he didn't punish his kids enough, apparently. And then it seems like it kind of passed down and they started becoming more, like, worshiping idols more and more and more and more.
Mm.
And then also, that could have affected some of these. And also these men were good-looking men. They had a lot of wives. They were not focused where they needed to be.
Mm. Yeah, and it's probably the case that Rehoboam, when he hears the word serve, he's probably never served anybody in his entire life. He's probably always been served by someone else. And so just even hearing that kind of advice is probably just...
Serve himself.
Yes. Yeah. And so he gets really turned away. What were you going to say?
Like, how often do we go seek out people that you already have an idea planted in your head of how you want to handle something, and so you go find people that will just sort of validate that idea, so that you feel like, oh, I'm not the only person that thinks this way, and you kind of get your way by default. You don't have to hear really what some other people might say. You have enough people rally with you in your corner. If your heart's set on something, you're gonna have people that make it make sense.
Yeah. What do we call those? Yes men, or echo chambers. You ever heard of echo chambers? It's when we seek validation rather than Baghdad Bob. I'll never forget a few years ago during the riots around the country, and there was one reporter out on the street, and he's reporting, and there's like a building on fire and chaos behind him, and his statement is, "It's a mostly peaceful protest." I'm like, sometimes read the room, right? I've always chuckled about that. But he is definitely arrogant. And like Lisa said, the parentage has not been great, as demonstrated by some of these kings. But he goes to the place where he knows he's going to get confirmation rather than real advice, real constructive criticism. And so he does not show a level of discernment. And so instead of coming back to the people with a conciliatory heart, trying to find peace, what does he do? He just, the young friends advise him, and we'll see that's exactly what he does, is they actually want him to stir the pot more. And so their advice to him is, you're going to go in there not with whips, but with scorpions, referring to the sting, right? So if you go down to verse 12, It says, so Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam. So notice who's there. Jeroboam. You already see here early on, he has the ears of the people around him. Jeroboam does. And so as he's coming in to meet with Rehoboam, he's already pointed out as somewhat the leader of this contingent. They came the third day, as the king said, asking counsel that the old men had given him. He spoke to them according to the counsel of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, I will discipline you with scorpions. So the king did not listen to the people, for it was a turn of affairs brought about by the Lord, that he might fulfill his word, which the Lord had spoken to Ahiah the Shilonite, to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. So you have them come back, and it just plays out just like you think it's going to. Instead of having any kind of humility in his heart, any kind of peace seeking, he comes back with fire, and it just causes things to get worse. There's one other thing I want to point out here. All right, so that's kind of what we're left with. But as you get down to verse 16, what's the response? It's interesting, the attitude of the people. What is their attitude toward Rehoboam and the southern kingdoms? They didn't like it. What do they say? They ask the question, what portion do we have in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. And so they really feel like outsiders. And in large part, it's Rehoboam's fault. He treats them like outsiders. And so they say, to your tents, O Israel, look now to your own house, David. And so you really see at this moment this divide occurs, and that's the way they're going to go forward. It's kind of sad. Because up until this point, they had been a united front, had been able to hold off any kind of outsiders from any kind of warfare, any kind of trouble. But this really is the beginning of the end of the kingdom. It says, but verse 17, Rehoboam reigned over the people of Israel who lived in the cities of Judah. Then King Rehoboam, and then he'll talk about in the next thing, he does what he says. Then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was taskmaster over the forced labor, and all Israel stoned him to death with stones. That's a short-lived career. He didn't last very long. They don't like what he's coming to tell them, so they stone him. Then the king hurried to mount his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. He arrogantly thought, I'm just going to keep going on, and I'm just going to push them harder. And they're not hearing it. And so they cause him to flee. And verse 19 says, so Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. So that's how the beginning of the reign of Rehoboam goes. It's not very well from here. We may talk a little more about Rehoboam in just a minute, but that's the condition of the nation at the time Jeroboam becomes king of the north. Any questions about that area? Any other things you want to bring out before I move to Jeroboam? All right. Answered all your questions. All right, so let's go down to verse 25. Let's see. Let me remind you of this. So if you're wanting to study this, that's just a reminder. if you're thinking, where would I find Jeroboam? Would I find Jeroboam in Kings or Chronicles? What's the thing you remember? Kings is written to all the kings. If you remember that, written to all the kings of both nations. Chronicles, however, is written in regard to what? Judah. So you won't find much about Jeroboam in Chronicles, but you will in 1 Kings. So as we continue on, verse 25, the text begins by saying, Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there. And he went out from there and built Penuel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, okay, before we get into that, so structurally, where are we? Okay, again, where does he build? Where does he build his house? Shechem, right? So Shechem's here, and you'll see again, it's right here in the hill country of Ephraim. Where is he from originally? He's an Ephraimite, so he's from Ephraim. He builds his palace there, and he also builds a home in Penuel, which is over here, more out east, along the river basin here off the River Jordan. So he builds his home, he settles in. Now, we don't know, as far as I'm aware, how long it took for 26 to occur. All right, so we don't know the gap in time. But at least by this time, he is the leader of the northern 10 tribes. He's been appointed that. He's built his home there. At some point, he said in his heart, now the kingdom will turn back to the house of David if this people go up to offer sacrifices in the temple of the Lord at Jerusalem. Then the heart of this people will turn again to their Lord, to Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and return to Rehoboam, king of Judah. So, so you'll notice here, clinically, what will we call this? Paranoia, right? He's very paranoid about what?
About losing his kingship.
Losing his standing, losing his life, losing his throne, right? So he's very worried that after a little bit of time, the people are going to turn back and they're going to go back. Now, what does he believe is going to be the cause of that return? Yeah, because it was in Jerusalem where the temple was located. That's where the people went for worship. And he's worried when they cross that border and they go back there that their hearts may be rekindled to reestablish that relationship. So that feeling arises in his heart. And so he feels as though he needs to do something about it. So go down, go to verse 28. So you have another king taking counsel. So the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold. And he said to the people, okay, so before I get into that, let's just step by step here. So he takes counsel. We don't know what the counsel was, but we can at least assess what it was about, which is what? How do we deal with this problem of worship where the people may be tempted to return back to Jerusalem? We need to figure out how we keep them out of the south, out of the temple area, and we keep their attention and focus up here. And so they make the decision they're going to make 2 calves of gold. That to me is so fascinating, especially when you consider what he's going to say in a minute. So he decides to make 2 golden calves. And he said to the people, you have gone up to Jerusalem long enough. Long enough. Behold your gods. Behold your gods. That is the word Elohim, used in Genesis chapter 1 to refer to the God. Here he uses it in reference to the golden calves. You have 2 Elohim, O Israel, who brought you up, who what? Who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. He set one in Bethel and the other he put in Dan. Again, I am struck by a crazy, just why does he pick 2 golden calves? Well, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Yes. Yeah.
My versions of these say, he says it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. I.e., it's too big a burden.
Yeah.
It puts in extra stress and it takes you away from the form of the road. I'll have one that says, you've gone up there long enough, it's too much for you. Like you're putting it on him and say, that's too big a burden. You don't want to go up to Jerusalem. It's just too much.
Yeah.
You ought to do something easier.
So this kind of gets into, and I would be curious to know the proper interpretation of what would be the best translation of that. Because really, you can read that a few different ways. He can say, you've gone up there long enough, right? Like commanding them that you need to stop that. Or it could be, you've gone up there long enough, right? That's a very different meaning. And I think these 2 translations, whichever one is the most proper, whichever ideal it is, it can change how it's received, right? Is it a demand or is it a compassionate statement? But whichever way, we know his motive is what? We got to stop this. You've done this long enough. That is interesting. I didn't know that, Doug. I'd like to do some more research on that. But either way, he decides to pick 2 calves. Now, of course, we can go back to the book of Exodus and we know kind of where this comes from, right? What happens? Moses goes up on the mountain and he's up there for 40 days and the people are like, he's gone, he's left us. And then the funniest kind of sequence is there with Aaron. After they convince him, you need to make for us a what? You need to make well, first they just ask for a god, right? But then later on, Aaron, when he's defending himself, what does he say? It just jumped out. He threw the gold in there. They brought me all this gold. I put it in the fire and it jumped out. There's some real humor in the scriptural text if you read it with the right mindset. But they chose a golden calf. And from my understanding, that has ties back to Egypt and their idols they had. One of them was a golden calf that they worshipped at. What's that? Yeah, he just lets it lie there. He knows good comedic timing, doesn't he? He just lets it lay. Sometimes the best thing to do with a joke is let it lay. Although it's not really funny. And then the people end up having to eat their golden calf, right? Remember, he feeds it to them. Yeah. So anyway, this seems to me to recall back to that. It is interesting. Jeroboam chose that, or whoever in his retinue chose a calf. He doesn't just choose one, though. He chooses 2. Why would he do 2? Yeah. It's convenience, right? I am making God more convenient for you. That's a whole different discussion we can have as my time quickly erases away, is can we make God too convenient for people? No, sir. Yeah, we can. We can make God too convenient for people. I got you. But People want a convenient God. They want a convenient religion. They want a convenience, everything, make it convenient. He did that. He set one up down here in Bethel. Notice its proximity to Jerusalem. The other one, he set up way up here in Dan. So if you're north, you can go to Dan. If you're in the south, you can come to Bethel. He didn't just do that, though, as I'm quickly running out of time. He also, you've heard as you read 1 Kings and Chronicles about the high places. Who helped set up high places? High places were like little places that you can go and worship. If you can't get to Dan, if you can't get to Bethel, you can go to the high places and worship. And so you also see those here with Jeroboam, originating with Jeroboam. Yes, ma'am, as we close out. Did you raise your hand? Oh, I thought you raised your hand. Harry.
I find it interesting, he also changed the priesthood.
Yes.
It was supposed to be the Levites, and it didn't matter which tribe you were from.
Yeah, so if we had time to get into that, he makes some major changes. And so we've noted 3 of them. He changed the God they worshiped. He changed the place of worship. And he changed the priestly order. None of which he had the ability to do, the authority to do. And yet he did all that. And the text simply says in verse 29, or verse 30, I'm sorry, this thing became a sin for the people as far as Dan to be before one. And so he had all the hope and promise in the world. God affirmed a covenant with him. If he would just have remained faithful, God would have remained with him and with his household. But what happens to Jeroboam as a result of all this? He loses his kingdom. He loses his throne. Not only does he lose it, but his family loses it. Another will arise from a different place other than him. But he sets the northern tribe on to his path of sin and idolatry that they never recover from. And so we kind of have a sad ending here. Anyway, thank y'all for your time and your study. We're going to dismiss from Bible study and rejoin for our worship in just a couple of minutes. Good to see you.